From a people who worshipped the stars, wise men were led by a star, to a king sent by the one who created the stars. With these words, we are modifying the Eastern Orthodox Troparion of Nativity, a short liturgical hymn about those three venerable wise men, whose names were Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar. Melchior was a Persian royal and scholar of the Zoroastrian faith, Balthazar a Babylonian initiate of the Chaldean religion, and Gaspar was of the Hind, steeped in the wisdom of India. Holy men, they came bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the newborn Jesus. Believers of ancient religions on a journey that does not leave its starting point behind, but rather transforms it. This journey's end came on January 6th and marks the close of the 12 days of Christmas. But it is not often remembered that on their way, the three are said to have stopped at the house of a certain mysterious old lady, Befana, the friendly Christmas witch. It was a cold night, and the woman was happily perched by a fireplace from which she had no intention of being dislodged. It is no wonder, then, that when a knock was heard, it was only grudgingly that she came to the door. "We have come to tell you of our journey," they called out. "We know your reputation for making toys, and we go presently to meet the newborn king, to whom a star does guide us, and would that you come as well." So spoke the pilgrim astronomers. Befana, however, did not wish to leave the warmth of her hearth, and so she bid them go on ahead, promising all the while, more to herself than to the strangers, that she would catch up with them in the morning when the sun had begun warming the roads. Then would she meet this royal child of which they spoke, and not only this, but she would also bring him many gifts from her inventory, gifts such as to make good on her reputation as maker and bearer of toys, on account of which the magicians had decided to recruit her to their party. Before going any further, we may pause to interrogate our tale's geographic context. Some may suppose that the biting cold of winter the good old lady was so keen to avoid would not really be so severe in any of the regions between Persia, Babylon, or India, the several starting points of the intrepid sages, and Bethlehem, their final destination. But whatever the weather, we should recall that it is by Befana's standards that it was judged too intense. Furthermore, we should not rule out some meteorological exception that year, or her living in a snowy mountain town whose altitude fortified the cold season. We should also consider that the priests of the Orient, like St. Nicholas, are said to routinely leave gifts at children's homes the world over. They would certainly be capable of a single, magically enabled transport to some distant, colder, northern clime, to which the good witch Befana was native. In fact, as it turns out, the truth of the matter lies with this latter possibility, for the Befana lived somewhere in Europe. Now, another objection might rear itself. Why, if they commanded such an art, would the three wise men not have used it to arrive instantaneously at their Judean destination? The answer, of course, is that they did not know where the latter was, for which reason a star had to guide them. Whereas they evidently did have prior knowledge of the woman's dwelling, on account of the widespread reputation her craft as toy-maker had won for her. Distracting questions aside, let us join again with the old lady, who, incidentally, is not only known as Befana, her Italian name, but also as Babushka, grandmother, in Russia, for it is in these countries that she is celebrated to this day. The morning after the strange visitation, she did as she had promised, dressed herself in heavy garb, filled a sack full of toys from her workshop, buying a few more from nearby craftsmen she trusted, and took to the roads. Alas, it now dawned on her, she had not thought to ask those men the way to Bethlehem. Indeed, they could not have told her, even if she had asked, for they did not know it themselves. Neither did the people she bothered for directions know of this place, or else they would simply tell her it was farther along, always farther along. It is said, therefore, that she wanders still, even now, hoping to find the place, and leaving gifts from her bottomless sack of toys in those houses she passes, where children happen to live. This, however, is a pessimistic and, in truth, ludicrous conclusion to our story. Suppose she had been wandering all this time, is it at all likely that nobody, not one soul, in all these centuries, has been aware of Bethlehem and the Nativity story, so as to leave her every plea for directions unanswered? Hardly. Further, children report receiving gifts from Befana every year, on the year. Evidently she is not lost, haphazardly distributing her bounty as she goes. Rather, she follows a specific itinerary and keeps to it, punctually and deliberately. The reality, then, is that Befana has been granted patronage over the season, the gift of returning to the earth every January 6th in order to do what she loves, make children happy. And although she was not with the 3 wise men at Bethlehem, she may now see the Christ in every child, and by serving them, honor him also. They, in turn, receive gifts in some wise intended for Jesus. The same arrangement has been struck with a certain Frau Holle, our second Yuletide fairy queen, who is also known as Frau Perchta, a local name specific to Bavaria and Austria. Holle's ward is in the northern scapes of Europe, where she is said to bring gifts to children during the 12 nights of Christmas. According to those tireless preservers of German folklore, the brothers Grimm, especially Jacob Grimm, she was once known under the guise of an ancient Norse pagan goddess. In fact, she was a noblewoman, a descendant of Odin, patron of the wild hunt, and a relative of the huntress Diana from Greco-Roman mythology. Out hunting one winter's day, she rode too far and too carelessly and died on the forest trails. But Frau Holle wished to continue sporting with her hunting hounds and asked to be allowed to remain on earth. No mere attachment to the things of this world, hers was a love for the archetypal beauty of nature. Here, again, there is a double reading available to us. One, pessimistic and untenable. The other, edifying and proper. For some claim that she refused to enter paradise, and have understood Frau Holle's fate as a punishment, a labor foisted on her soul on account of its not wanting to move on from the earth after her death. But the very fact that entry into paradise was offered to her attests to the lady's righteousness. After asking not to be parted from the forests and wildlife she loved, she was granted a special patronage over them. Therefore does she return to the earth, but only during the 12 days of Christmas, when her annual hunt marks the end and beginning of each year. And while she hunts, she also bestows gifts, products of her supernatural raids. The rest of the time, she dwells in a portion of the terrestrial paradise, and can be met with somewhere near to the fairy world, but not in one of those provinces where mischievous and malevolent sprites are found. Concerning that place where one might meet Frau Holle, the brothers Grimm record the story of a queen who ruled compassionate and keen, but started off as an orphan girl, wretched alike a dirty pearl. Her mother left, her father bereft. He married a woman, cunning, cruel. She thought the man a useful fool, and bore a child, the girl's sister. Then father died as well soon after. The sister was lavishly spoiled. The older one was worked and toiled, until one day, upon the spindle, she pricked herself and opened the window to drip her blood, and so not to stain anything indoors with its red hue. But then the spindle did fall out and bumped along a strange route. Our orphan girl did go to follow down a rabbit hole, a pass quite narrow, and soon arrived in fairy country, for that rabbit hole was a portal into the magical realm. There she encountered a talking oven in the middle of a forest. "My trays are lined," it said, "with ready-to-be-eaten bread. But if it stays, it will burn instead. A human girl, why not help me? collect up my wheaty bounty. And there was also a talking tree. My apples ripe, collect from me, it called. She did as the enchanted oven and tree asked before coming to her house. One of the manners of Frau Holle, who presently appeared at her door and thanked the girl for collecting her bread and apples, before asking the young woman to help clean up the house before supper. Again she obliged. And for a time she lived there, until a sadness came upon her, and she confessed that she wanted to go back home. For despite the abuse, she wanted to resume her life. Frau Holle smiled at this, and told the girl that it was proper for her to return to the ordinary human realm, and she showed her the way back by the same rabbit hole she had first come through. But as the young woman readied her exit, it began snowing heartily, and with the snow there fell around her an abundance of riches, gold and many precious gems, which Frau Holle told the girl to carry off as best she could. In the human world, the newly rich young woman quickly earned the love of her people, sharing her wealth and catching the eye of a prince, who she married, becoming queen to the realm. The stepmother, however, jealous of all this, sent her natural daughter, who she had hitherto greatly spoiled, down the same route, but being quite haughty and refusing to assist the talking oven tree or Frau Holle, that one did not receive favor like the first, and was sent away empty-handed. Now we turn to France, specifically the region of Franche-Comté and the nearby area, where we find the third fairy queen of the season. In life, she was the Countess of Montbéliard, and her name was Henriette de Montbéliard, born in the year 1387, wife to the Count of Württemberg, Eberhard IV. Following the death of Eberhard in 1419, Henriette governed Montbéliard and Württemberg both, and is remembered for her good works and the protection she afforded her people. Indeed, she was a good and kind countess, until at the castle of Etterborn in the year 1444 it came to pass that the good lady disappeared. Locals, however, attest that thereafter she began appearing every year on Christmas, donning peasant garb, riding a donkey, and bearing gifts for children. She tests the hospitality of her people, knocking on doors and asking for lodging, encouraging virtue throughout the lands she governed so well. In this form, she is known as Tante, that is Aunty Ari, short for Henriette. She has been said to have feet like a goose, but the fact of the matter is that they are actually swan's feet. For during the festive season, Aunty Ari flies from home to home in the form of a swan, and for convenience's sake simply does not bother to transform her feet into their usual human semblance, no doubt saving a great deal of time. We have, therefore, our three canonical magi, the wise men, and our three ladies of folklore. But what are the three sisters, these ladies of winter? Are they human souls, or are they fairies proper? In truth, there are two kinds of fairies. Some are a species entirely different from the human race, whereas others are manifestations and projections of the human soul. The ladies of winter are of the second sort. They are a magical fairy form of righteous humans who once lived. The Twelvetide is an open gate to benevolent magic, to noble mages and fairies, a time in which we may recognize what is worthy, as the wise men did, by exchanging gifts and thereby seeing what is worthy in each other. And just as gifts force us to meet one another in our specificity, force us to reflect on what we know about a person in order to get them something they might genuinely like, it is fitting that, at the level of culture, the season has fashioned for itself all sorts of particular folkloric mediators, like the Befana and Frau Holle and Aunty Tante, gifts of folklore given us by righteous ancestors. Christmas is when we feel most protective of tradition and most willing to engage with it, for otherwise traditions are a dead letter. But we need not leave it there. Surely we have room enough for magic and gifts the whole year round.